Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 825, I've got my Surface Duo 2. Going to be talking about that and how much I really enjoyed it. I don't think Rich is quite as keen as me, but we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about new builds of Windows 10 and Windows 11, Android apps on Windows 11. I've got a new microcontroller and light strip to talk about. Got a EV chat, all sorts. So let's get straight to the rest of the show. Gary and Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And we're all here again after going separate ways for a few weeks. We're all back together again. And we've got quite a lot to talk about this week. We've got a very interesting thing that I've got to play with. No, it's not a Surface Duo. It's a LED light strip, which I can talk about more. And I'm having a lot of fun with playing with that. Yeah, so
very exciting.
Maybe I'll leave this glowing behind me or something like that. But anyway, let's move that out of the way. So we'll talk about that. I've got something else to talk about.
Yay!
So
Dear.
we'll talk about that as well. We have some new builds of Windows 11. We've got Android on Windows 11, and I can even show you Android running on Windows 11. I'm going to turn these lights flashing up now before they.
Are you not in the United States, Ian?
I'm not, and I've got some apps that are not from the App Store either. So, we'll talk about that as well, and a couple of things. It's the anniversary of the launch of Windows XP yesterday, wasn't it? Though the general availability.
20 years.
Yeah, that made me feel
a
old.
nice little piece on that, Richard. Yeah, feeling old because we used the beta, didn't we? I remember the Whistler beta, which we can talk about. And there's some 21H2 updates. I'm really confused about this, so maybe someone can put me right on this one, because Microsoft say one thing and then there's something else, which is it's a real surprise, I know. So let's start with the Surface Duo. So my Surface Duo arrived this week, last week, and I've been playing with it over the weekend, and I must admit I am really enjoying this. I've seen quite a few different reviews. Some people don't get it, which is fair enough if you don't get it, but I am actually really enjoying it. It's a vast improvement over the previous one. Anyway, that's the first thing I can say. Not so much in functionality, but in terms of the things that we talked about with the main limitations, as the camera on the original Surface Duo, and this, you can see the camera bump on there. It's quite big actually, but you soon get used to it. But actually, they've changed the form factor quite a bit as well. So I don't know if you can really see on this, but it's a lot smoother and curved on the edges, so it actually feels a bit smoother and nicer in the hand. It doesn't feel as fragile. I don't know if you felt with this when you held the previous one, the original one, which I've got over here. It didn't break. It's never broken, but it did feel a lot more fragile because it's thinner. There's not much in it, but it is slightly thinner. The original one is slightly thinner. Mm-hmm. But that made it did feel a bit like you could break it, and this does feel a lot more substantial with the hinges and everything else. And the other thing that they've added in is NFC as well, which I know we talked about. So in the past, what I've been doing, I've been using this all the time. But if I go out shopping or I'm going out for a walk or something like that, I usually take another phone with me, usually the Galaxy Note, to use for NFC and for taking pictures. But now I don't need to anymore. I can take one phone. And actually, the camera on this is really good and really quick as well. You've got, first of all, the power button is the fingerprint reader. So by just holding it like that and turning it on, it unlocks it as well. So that works really well. There's no issues. It just responds straight away. It comes straight to life. You hit the camera button and it's ready to go. Take pictures straight away. And as you take pictures, you get the little preview of them coming up in the other window. So it's really quick at taking pictures, which one of the issues with the original Duo is it never could quite understand what your intention was, because the camera is only had the front facing camera. You always have to turn it around that way to do a rear shot. and it would be on this screen, and you couldn't see what's happening on this screen, and it was trying to guess what you were doing, and it never quite got it right. I think what they've done with this is there's only that one mode for it to work in the camera that way, or you can change it to, you can sort of use it that way as well if you want, but it doesn't have to try and second guess you. So the camera works straight away out of the box. It's fast, good pictures. I've done quite a few comparisons. I'll have to write an article upon it, but the camera is really good. It's as good as the Note 21, which I've been comparing it with, and miles better than the original Duo because that only had that small front camera. So camera works really well. NFC works really well as well, but it's fast. I think that's probably the main thing. There's no lags on the quirks with it. With occasionally you close something off and it wouldn't respond, or you'd be in the screen and you flick it around and it wouldn't do what you expected it to do. But that is not an issue on MOS. Really, it feels like the device that it should have been the Gen 1 device, really. But I'm really enjoying it, and it's got this nice little. I don't be able to show you. I don't know if you've seen the videos of it, but because the edge curve, the screen curves on the edge now, you can see you've got the clock on there, but you get your notifications on here and your charging and everything else. So when a phone call comes in, this sort of flashes up here, so you can actually see text message or notifications on here as well. So overall, I really enjoyed really like using this. It's a lot better than the original one. I really like using the original one, but it did have its quirks and it wasn't good enough to carry as a single device, and now they've got around that. So apart from the cost, which is still an issue, I think they've managed to crack this device. I know it's not for everybody, definitely not, but I really like it, and I do like it in black as well.
Yeah, I think probably the only thing I'd miss now is wireless charging. I've got so used to using that.
Yeah, wireless charging. Yeah, there is that, and I've got the little magnetic thing on there as well.
And
so
also, I don't believe that there's any kind of waterproofing.
IPX1, I think IPX1. So I think the original Surface was, this was IPX, not at all. Keep it away from all moisture. But apparently you can run water over it without it being a major issue. But it's not waterproof as such.
I think you should do that now, Ian, on camera. Let's see what happens.
Live on camera, yeah, sure. It still feels, it still feels like it certainly wouldn't be a device you want to throw around in your bag or anything like that. It's still, you've got those hinges and everything else. I played with the Fold, and the Fold has that kind of similar thing where you think I really wouldn't want to give this too much grief. But I got a bumper for it, but I haven't actually bothered to put the bumper on because it doesn't.
So if IPX1, you're absolutely fine as long as the rain's falling vertically.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's defined as having protection against dripping water drops vertically falling.
Yeah, I think so. It's one of those things. If you had your phone in your pocket and it was raining, you wouldn't have to worry about getting too soaked. Whereas I think with the original one, it's not IPX at all. I think it's there is no water.
That's quite poor compared to the rest of the flagship market out there, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, you are compromised by the form factor of the Fold, the hinging and everything else. Although it doesn't appear to be, there isn't any noticeable weak spots, caused by the hinges, because there isn't any edges that you can see or any connectors or anything else like that. So, yeah, I think they could probably make it waterproof if they really tried, but. As Microsoft always go for the 3rd gen device, they have to leave some stuff for that, don't they?
Well, yeah. So let's hope it gets to a 3rd gen. I mean, that I think is going to be a test, because a lot of Microsoft devices get past the first 2 generations and then they get bored of it. So
it's if they get to the 3rd one, yeah.
But in theory, by the third one, they'll probably fix it. Will it get Android 12 by then, do you think? And I mean, it's running Android 11 now or 10?
Yeah, 11.
11.
Yeah, they've said that I think that it's probably the first half of next year when Android 12 comes out. But you really get the benefit of the dual screen on it. I mean, there's one or two nice little things. Like, for example, you can say that you can preset apps that will open in dual screen mode automatically. spam mode. So, for example, OneNote I've got open here. When I open that, then it automatically opens in dual screen mode, and you see on one side I've got OneNote the photos, and on the right hand side I've got get the preview. So it makes sense for apps like that. Outlook, I have it for Outlook so that you get the mail on one side and the preview on the other side. Some apps don't make sense to do that. You wouldn't do that on, say, the Hue Light because the Hue Light isn't dual screen aware, so it doesn't seem make much sense. But you could do, because it would span over. So you get that choice. But for the apps that are dual screen aware, it's definitely it's a nice feature that you can have that automatic dual screen mode as well. And a lot of things I've got a lot of usage for the dual screen. I use that quite a bit now, so especially, but it's mainly the Microsoft apps that are optimized. The Google ones, unsurprisingly, aren't optimized for dual screen. There's only one, I think. The one app that Microsoft haven't done is the Authenticator app, which would actually be really handy if it supported the dual screen mode. But yeah, there's still some with their own apps to do, but most of the ones that make sense from the Microsoft ones do go over. But the split screen is great for OneNote and other applications, email and OneNote and so on. So yeah, there's still, I think that actually, aside from the hardware, ironically for Microsoft being a software company, the software is probably needs the most work. There's things like I said, some of those single screen apps could be optimized better for dual screen. They showed off the Your Phone app supporting Android, showing you could launch apps separately, the Android app separately, like you can on Samsung phones. They showed that at the keynote, the announcement, and that's not available. So you can only do screen mirroring at the moment. So they've got, obviously that's in the works because they demoed it, so they just need to enable it now. But it's there's the launcher app is still basic. If you use the Microsoft Launcher on a Samsung device or any other Android, there's loads of settings. You've got customization, and they've not included any of those in the ones that come on the Duo, which they've made. So they're kind of hidden features or disabled features, which doesn't. I don't really understand why that when they control the hardware. So there's stuff for them to do on that, but they have certainly got rid of the quirks that you would have. Not all. It wasn't very often, but occasionally you'd swipe up like that and it would do the swipe down, or you'd swipe down and it would do the swipe up. There was odd things like that occasionally, and they seem to have gone. But the faster processor seems to have made a difference as well, because it's very smooth now as well. So it's for my usage now, it's I can carry one phone around me and it works fine for me. So whether they'll get to third gen, I don't know, but I really do like using that as well. So I compared it with I played with the Fold for quite a bit of time last week, and I prefer the dual screen. The way I can describe it is if you use a laptop with a dual screen or a desktop and two screens, going back to one screen is, you feel the limitations. So if I'm at work and I've got dual screens and then I go and work at another office with a single and I'm back on just the laptop, you can feel that restriction in productivity, and that's what it's like using a single screen once you get used to the dual screens on the phone. So yeah, it's but anyway, it's nice. I do like it. So I wouldn't recommend it to the average consumer. You have to have a specific use case, I think, for it. But I guess that's the same for all the those the foldables at the moment. There's specific usage for them. It does make a nice tablet though when you put it into the span mode with with the you can see it. You can put the font size nice and big, so you don't have to wear your glasses. It works quite well on that actually. So I've enjoyed playing with that this week, but yeah, it's a nice device.
At £1,500, it should be a nice device.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably the biggest issue. I don't know how much the iPhone Pro Max X, whatever it is, costs, but yeah, it's a niche device, and you're paying for that niche device, aren't you? It's not going to sell in the quantities that the iPhone, even the most expensive iPhones, sell. So you paying a premium because they're not manufacturing them at the same volume. So yeah, it's a niche device, but if the price was a bit lesser, it would be a great device for the price, I think it only means it's going to be a niche device. But yeah, I'm certainly like using it.
But of course, as of the last week, it's not the only Surface device that can have Android apps running on it.
What a that's such high quality.
Yeah, that was interesting thing. That's assuming you're in the US, as Gary mentioned.
Yes, you need to have a US Amazon account and a US region setting on your PC, and then I mean, as you say, there are ways and means around it. But yes, I think was it just after we recorded last week or the day after?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it was very quickly afterwards, and yeah. So this is the Windows subsystem for Android that turned up in, of all places, the Windows Insider beta channel, which did surprise me.
That's right. Yeah.
Because I would have thought we'd see it at the dev channel first, but it turned up in the beta channel. And basically, it is the promised way of running Android apps on a Windows 11 device via the Amazon App Store, which you've got to install through the Microsoft Store. And but US only at the moment, and obviously there's quite a limited range of official apps which we can get at. I'm sure, Ian, you've been using the various workarounds to bring things on. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so like you said, you've got to be on the beta channel, which I'm surprised at that. Maybe this, I'm not sure if it's because they intend to sort of bundle this more in the next version of Windows 11. So at the moment, it's a separate thing that you have to install. It's got its own separate screens and separate settings and everything else. So maybe that's why. But anyway, you get on the beta channel, you can search for Windows subsystem from Android and you can install it if you're in the US. So it wouldn't install on my machine, but a quick hop over with my Surface to the States, install it, and quick hop back again, and everything worked. Or actually, just change the region settings, but change the region settings and installed it. The next part was to get the Android, the Amazon App Store, which it wouldn't let me install. I didn't. When you try and sign in, it automatically detects us in the UK and asked me to sign in with Amazon UK, and it doesn't work. I've seen a few people have managed to use VPNs to fool it thinking it's in the States, but then you need to have a US-based Amazon account, which means you have to have a US-based phone number and credit card, and I wasn't really that bothered about going through all those hoops, so I didn't do it. But what I did find is that you can sideload them. And I used a tool here called TinyADB, which ADB is the Android tool for installing things, and it's really simple to connect up. You basically install one of these tools. There's loads of them on the market or available for download, and you just download the APK files as you would do if you were sideloading on your phone, and you do ABD install and then the APK name, and then it installs. And there's a couple of bits and pieces, but that's it. As you can see here, this is the Philips Hue app for Android and the Arlo app for Android, and there isn't a Philips Hue app for PC, although there is a web site but not an app. So I installed those and they work perfectly well. Arlo did say I couldn't export them because Google Play Services wasn't installed, so I don't think you're going to get. I've seen people coming at workarounds, but I don't think you're going to get Google Maps on here or anything else. But these other third-party ones seem to find, particularly the Arlo one and this Hue one, they work absolutely perfectly. There's no problems at all. I can control my lights, as you can see, real time. It's absolutely fine. It's fast. The apps are fast as well. The only thing I found is it has to fire up the subsystem first, unless you put it in continuous mode. But if you put it in continuous mode, it fires up the subsystem when you start Windows, and it takes about 2 gig of RAM. So if you're okay to give up a couple of gigs of RAM with your machine, but I'm on an 8 gig machine, so I don't really want to. So I put it as needed. So these are all working fine now. But when I shut the last one down, it shuts the subsystem down, and then if I open it again, it takes about 20-30 seconds to start up that first time. So it's a bit of compromise with that. But the apps work fine. I even managed to get the Microsoft Launcher installed. Which is the Android. Oh, there it is. Which is the Android launcher that you use on the Duo. So you can actually install launchers and everything else. So you can install any anything. You can install Android browsers on here. You can install Edge for Android and run it. But the actual apps feel as fast as if they're native. You can't tell that they're sort of emulated. It's a bit like, I guess you've used the Linux subsystem, and now it's got the GUI support as well. I think, Richard, you played with that, haven't you?
I have, yeah, but I guess the difference between the Linux subsystem and this is, of course, you're running ARM apps, aren't you, in emulation, whereas a Linux system, you're running native x86 apps. So I think the responsiveness for ARM apps is quite surprising.
You can't tell. If I gave you this and you didn't know better, you wouldn't know that this is an Android app on this Surface laptop anyway.
Let's face it, PCs have to have a lot more grunt to run the same sort of apps that an Android device would be able to run. It's probably what. I mean, one interesting thing, and one statement I saw on Twitter the other day, which made me laugh, but actually you could kind of see it coming that way. When are they going to have a Windows subsystem for Windows?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, which is what 10X was, wasn't it?
Wasn't that UWP?
Yeah.
No, well, it's not kind of. I mean, if you had to talk about it, if you had an x86 subsystem for Windows or an x64 subsystem for Windows, then whatever Windows runs on ARM, then you've got the subsystem underneath it.
You can see here, I'm not going to open it up because it'll show my email off, but that's the Android version of Outlook, which I actually prefer to the Windows Mail tool. So it works perfectly fine. There's no. I mean, I'm not trying anything complex, but there's no lag on this. It's not unresponsive or anything else. You know, it just runs as a Windows app. So it runs really well. So like I said, I had to install it now with the APK. So that leads you to a bit of vulnerability, the fact that you could download a bad APK and cause yourself some problems, I suppose.
There's plenty of bad APKs out there.
Yeah. But there are some, they work. You know, I've seen people use games and other stuff, some of the simple games. I know I've heard a few people use the Android version of Minecraft and it works fine. So like you said, Gary, we've got a fairly hefty Intel processor compared to what would be running on a lightweight Android phone. So it should work. But yeah, they do. They work fine. Anything relies on Google Play stores is not going to work properly. But these work fine. It's just it's amazing. I mean, I've got the Linux subsystem in and the GUI, and you can have the GUI Linux apps as well. So you've got GUI Windows apps, GUI Linux apps, and Android apps all running on the same device. So they run perfectly well. But I'm guessing the only thing is, it's the use case for this. These two are probably the most useful ones I could think of. But I'm not sure how much. How often I thought, I really wish that Android app was available for Windows. It's perhaps maybe a few years ago, but I'm not sure whether that's the case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few apps out there. I mean, it's mostly smart home stuff I can see. Like you've got your camera apps and things, and there's quite a few I use which would be really good to have. I mean, I know that things like there is a smart things Windows app, but it's not quite as good as the Android one. A lot of the camera apps aren't quite as good. In fact, some of the camera apps just don't work on Windows, so I can certainly see some benefit there in some of those more obscure things. Device control stuff, I think, is probably the most likely use.
I got Switch.
One thing I can really see being useful for is with my EV. I mean, with route planning. I mean, there's a lot of really good route planning apps on Android which aren't on Windows, and there's times I want to just plan the route sitting at the desk rather than on the phone. So bit bigger screen real estate would be useful on that. So yeah, I can certainly see that. It's interesting. I wonder if you could get Android Auto running on the desktop.
I guess it would depend if it needs any of the Google Play stuff, because obviously there's none of the Google Play stuff in it at all.
Which is a restriction.
Although there are people saying that you can get around this.
There have been some people playing around with that a bit, but
yeah, I mean, there are always ways and means to get around stuff, but for the vast majority of users, they're not going to come across those.
No.
And also, there's normally a reason why those things aren't there. So, I think it's at the moment. I'd say it's a curiosity. It's interesting, and I can see there being Android apps I'd like to get working on the desktop, but I'm not sure how many. I guess it's where I'll find out how many actually need the bits and pieces from Google I didn't realise.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think that just exporting the video clip from Arlo would need it, but it says it does. But it still works fine. So yeah, I installed Switchbot on here because there's no Windows equivalent, so it was quite handy for that. And like I say, got the Hue ones. So there are a few useful ones, but yeah, but what I was just impressed with is how well it works. So I know they've got a roll. It's US only, so I'm guessing at some point they'll open this up to other markets, and that's probably dependent with Amazon, working with Amazon to populate the stores for each region. I think even if you're in the US, there's only 50 Android apps available anyway at the moment, so it's not a huge collection. But as a technology, it works really well. So it's quite interesting. And I think if you've got a decent machine with plenty of RAM, you could leave that subsystem running all the time, and things are going to work great on it. But
I guess that does at least mean we've got a decent Kindle app now.
Yes, you could use that one, no problem. Yeah. I mean, probably what we prefer to see. We're not going to get dedicated Windows apps, but probably the PWAs. That's where it would be better if all the platforms were using PWAs. But especially handy for you, Gary. You can try out your Android apps, in Windows without messing with the phone.
I have seen a lot of people use this as replacing the emulator, which is quite a good approach. Although there are some restrictions on that, again, obviously the Google Play stuff, and the fact that it's not actually easy to correlate if you've got multiple apps. Quite a lot of apps these days are actually more than one activity, more than one app running in the background, and that's actually quite tricky to do with it, unlike a conventional emulator. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot quicker to run against. I've seen on the videos people are trying it. So yeah.
It's certainly the technology works, whether they've got the contracts and store things and all that kind of thing in place, but the actual emulator or the subsystem works fine. No issues with that. Yeah, but it was interesting that was in that beta build as well. So
yeah, not that.
So because we did get a dev channel release last week. 22483, and I guess that has to be the most boring Windows Insider dev channel build we've had for some time.
Yeah.
The main change was added the ability to right click on recommended or more in the start and refresh the items. Yeah, so that was that one. What was a bit. Last week they also announced the 21H2 to be available on release preview, but it was already on release preview. How did that work?
I'm gonna have to defer to Gary because I'm getting very confused with what's happening. Yeah, so this is they call it the Windows 10 November 2021 update, aren't they?
Yes.
That's due to happen, and so I think if you're running Windows 10 in release preview, which you can do, you've begun getting 21H2 more 21H2 bits now. I mean, they did a 21H2 release preview. I think it'll be actually it might be today. Actually, I think there was there is a 21H2 thing today, but I think that just fixing the printer stuff. Yeah, so because Microsoft is still fighting the good fight with printers. I don't think Microsoft wants us to print, really, to be honest. It's waste paper. It's bad for the environment. So stop printing, because Windows, let's face it, it doesn't work very well anymore.
Do you think that's going to be their COP26 announcement?
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to save the planet by removing printer support from Windows, because let's just remove it and have done with it, because they keep patching it and it keeps breaking. Or rather, when I say breaking, it keeps having more and more holes. So, so that's the Windows 10 is in the release preview channel, as is the Windows 11. It's getting really messy now. It's starting to feel really messy. I don't know about you, but I'm having problems keeping my various VMs up to date for the various versions that are out there, because they also released a release preview of was it 21H1 as well? I think happened today.
Yeah.
Oh, just yeah.
And what was really strange as well was in the blog post they said that 19.04.1288 is the one that they're identified as the release one, but the release preview ring was already on 13.19 when they said that. But then they announced that release preview was getting it, but it already had it. And then, as you mentioned, tonight we've got 13.20 on release preview as well. So they announced something that had already been announced. More announcements than a Tory budget, re-announcements than a Tory budget.
I know,
but
it's getting very confusing, political reference there aside. I mean, this always slightly worried me about the approach they were taking with Windows 10 and Windows 11 in parallel, because it was going to start getting weird at some point, and it's now getting weird. Working out what's happening. So so there's new 21H1, 21H2 builds for Windows 10, and of course the cool stuff is Windows 11. I mean, I'm guessing we're never going to see that Windows subsystem for Android going anywhere near Windows 10 anytime soon, are we?
Nope.
No, probably not. Although it wouldn't surprise me if somebody got it working, because it seems to be that somebody gets everything working.
Yeah.
So it's very, very confusing. So announced something that was already out with a different build number than it was already out, and now they've announced something else that replaces what they talked about last week as well. So
yeah, I mean, it's almost like a reload of what they were doing. Almost a hot reload of what they were doing.
We're not going to get into hot reload, are we?
I'm afraid so, Gary. I'm very interested to hear what you think about what happened in the last week with hot reload. This is a little bit nichey, and it's kind of more developer thing, and Microsoft's approach to open source, which Microsoft has been a great friend of open source for the last, a long time. I mean, you look at things like Visual Studio Code, which is frankly brilliant. But they've also, the .NET framework, or the .NET Core, is it called now? I think .NET. That also went open source, and obviously the old framework 4.2 whatever that shipped with Windows back in the day is still very much closed source. However, .NET Core has absorbed as much as it can of that old framework over the years, and now I think we're up to, is it .NET 6 they're about to release? I think that's the next one. And so there was a bit of a furore last week, because there's a very, very useful function in this release, which is called hot reload. And what that does is, if you're a developer and your code stops, you need to fix it, make a change, you can then carry on without having to drop out, recompile, redeploy, yada yada. So it's a very useful feature. What happened was that was in the open source .NET, and then something happened at the end of last week, and I don't know if it was accidental or someone didn't think through the implications, but basically that function was yanked out of the open source .NET stuff and made a Visual Studio only function, which is obviously a commercial. This is Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code. So it was made a function of Visual Studio, which was unfortunate. And goodness me, did it kick off after that happened. And then there was a very impressive reverse ferret by Microsoft within a couple of days. They say, awful mistake. We didn't need to. We'll put it back. And so it's all back. But I mean, Gary, from a developer standpoint, what the heck happened?
Well, I mean, if you look at the pull request, it was definitely deliberate. I mean, you don't get a pull request which says deleting .NET reload, hot reload, which is basically what it said. Unless you actually deliberately mean to do that, and it was signed off. And to be fair, I mean, if we never had hot reload in the .NET Core open source, then I suspect nobody would have batted an eyelid about this, because it's the sort of thing Microsoft has always done, had stuff which is only in Visual Studio and only available to developers who don't pay for Visual Studio. But because it had been released and it was out there, and to then pull it away, I mean, it's this, I can't forget whose law it is, but the law basically entitlement. You feel entitled to have that now. You've had it. Can't take it away from me. I've had it, even if it was free. And I think that was what a lot of the furore was about. But it was also very much how perceived about how Microsoft's attitude to this was. And I know there's been a lot of pushback even from Microsoft employees about this. The way it was handled was very poor, from perception wise. I mean, it probably wasn't as bad as it sounded like, but the perception really was bad. And I was ill for all the 3 days as furore was going on, so I didn't really get involved that much in it. But when I came back and read about it, it's just unbelievable what went on. But yeah, I mean, certainly major players in the community really did push back, and so I mean, there were certain people who sort of really really angry about this, and understandably, because they've spent years pushing, and I have as well, saying that Microsoft's not the evil empire it was to developers anymore. They are supporting open source, and they have been supporting open source really well. But in the last few weeks, they've just made foot in mouth moments after foot in mouth moments. I mean, the whole .NET Foundation debacle. It's been very unfortunate, and I don't think it's deliberate. I think there's certain people in Microsoft who are very keen that they stay in the open source market and they actually support developers, because let's face it, the open source market is their biggest market they can get into for actually providing revenue to them on Azure. And that's what they're really all about. They want revenue on Azure. The developer tools don't really make that much money comparatively. What makes money is the hosting and everything on Azure. And if they can host open source projects, they'll do that quite happily. And they do host an awful lot of them. If people get upset with Microsoft and decide, well, that's enough that I'm going to host my stuff on AWS, on Amazon's services, that's a big issue. So I think they've got to be really cautious here. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of really strong pro-dev, pro-OS, open source within Microsoft, and some really good people in there who were pushing internally, I think, to get this reversed. And it's good to see it was reversed, even though the messaging could have been a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the open source .NET Core stuff, that's also cross-platform. So by yanking it out of that, it kind of put it back into Visual Studio, which frankly is Windows only. But I know there's a Mac version, but it's not the same thing at all. So it did smack that. But I mean, I've got to wonder. I mean, looking at it from my perspective, it seemed like it was just that's happened. It's one thing, and it seems almost a shame that it's undermined all the work that's been done in the last 10 years to kind of shed this, the beast of Redmond, moniker, because there are a lot of really fervent open source people within Microsoft, and of course, as you say, it's the way forward. So yeah, it was an interesting few days you missed there, Gary.
Yeah, it was. I'm quite glad I managed to stay out of that for Aurora, to be honest. There was no winners in that one. Definitely no winners.
Yeah, and you just kept seeing hot reload on Twitter. I mean, what the hell is hot reload?
It's one of those things.
But it's just like they've.
Yeah, I mean,
it's Visual Basic. And continue. That's what it is.
It is actually.
It's exactly like that. Actually, yeah. I've been using it quite happily for the last few months now, and it's brilliant. I mean, but then again, they did something similar with Visual Studio and the Android apps. You could basically use hot reload there, and that was really good. And so once you get used to it, you think, oh, this is like going back to Visual Basic days. So I can sort of pause, fix it, and carry on. And yeah, I think having to think, I might not better do that anymore, would be quite upsetting. I mean, I guess the other thing is, of course, that they shifted it to Visual Studio. Do you think there's some infighting happening now between Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio, because two are very, they're development platforms, and VS Code is very, very popular, massively popular.
Yeah.
Whereas Visual Studio, perhaps it's commercial, it's very expensive. Is there some sort of competition happening there?
I think there probably is. I think it's probably the same sort of infighting that goes on between GitHub and the DevOps, Azure DevOps. I think
that's true. Yes,
that was a very similar. I mean, there's two basically. Microsoft has lots of twin products with things which are evil twin and good twin, perhaps. Somehow people.
Windows 10. There we go. Both evil twins.
Yeah, but I think that they definitely have a lot of products which are very similar and do similar things, but one is commercial, one isn't commercial, perhaps. I mean, I'm a huge Visual Studio fan. I think it's got a lot going for it, and there's a lot of stuff in there which just doesn't really fit in a enterprise world. So it wouldn't make sense. Whereas Visual Studio Code is very lean, very mean. It's a different product. And as you mentioned, it is cross-platform as well, which makes a big difference in terms of where you can use it. And they also, one big thing which has got completely wiped out by this whole discussion is Visual Studio Code is now available in the browser. You can actually edit code in the browser, which is incredible.
That felt kind of inevitable, because obviously GitHub Codespaces have been doing that for a few months. So you kind of thought that must be coming soon. But yeah, although it's it's code in the browser, and you can edit code. You obviously can't compile it and do stuff with it because you haven't got a machine to turn it on. It's running in the browser. Whereas if you use, say, Gitpod or GitHub Codespaces, you're given a remote machine to compile against. But yeah, I think certainly for reviewing pull requests and things, it's brilliant actually. And it kind of belies the whole Visual Studio Code. You know, it is a browser app. It's very impressive. And my goodness me, it's quick. And I've even tried it on my iPhone, and that was a distressing experience.
Well, it runs on Android phones as well. It probably runs on your Duo.
Duo.
Duo would be really good for that.
The question is, Ian, will the code tree be on one screen and the source be on the other?
Oh, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Would it
split it like that? Yeah.
Would it be a dual screen aware web app?
But I think you are right. There's a lot of competition going on because it's going to be a very long time before Visual Studio runs in a web browser, if ever at all. But yeah, so I think that there's obviously competition going on. You've got a commercially a product which has to earn its way within Microsoft in Visual Studio. It's a code. It's got a cost code. It's a budget. Whereas Visual Studio Code perhaps doesn't, and it can go off and do other things.
I guess it's an entry point, as you say, to the Azure subscription world. It's going to provide these things, and then you'll hopefully then go and use Microsoft services, which, as a strategy, does seem to be working.
Yeah, it's really good. So I think that there's a lot going on, and it's difficult. I mean, Microsoft is a company of companies. I mean, there's just so many bits and pieces going on in Microsoft at any one time. You do wonder how they keep track of it all. Themselves internally, and obviously with restructures going on, we know there's been some pretty strange and job losses in the last few months, especially in the developer world anyway. And there's always things going on. I mean, it's like as you mentioned, UWP, that great beacon of hope for Windows programming.
Doesn't that stand for the unwanted platform?
Yeah, basically. And all developers were told that's going to be the future for Windows development, and now of course it's been basically sidelined. So
I think if you've developed for Microsoft in the last 20 years, you know things will change every few years. I mean, actually, that's one of the great things about the fact that it's .NET stuff is open source and it's community driven, and you actually get a feeling that it's not going to shift quite so much because there's a basis out there who can take it on if Microsoft pull the plug on certain bits of it. They tend to get put back in by the community. I mean, it's why I quite like Blazor as a web development system now, because it's .NET based. You've got some confidence it's going to be around for a while, unlike some maybe Silverlight and things.
Silverlight, yeah.
Which went out.
Still stick to VB4.
Yeah, and of course Silverlight went out of support last week.
Oh. And I wonder if you could use Visual Studio Code to write your 20-year-old operating system.
Probably good, yeah, that'd be really good.
Yeah, and it probably runs in the browser now because Windows XP, its 20th anniversary of the RTM, or was it first day it went on sale? Was the 25th of October?
The GA date, because RTM happened a few months previously. It was GA.
Yeah.
When you actually the last big launch, and it was a massive launch, wasn't it? I mean, it was obviously Windows 9.9 gets all the headlines, but it was kind of the merging of the Windows NT and the Windows 95 streams into one glorious NT based future called XP. It was I mean, looking back at it now, you think they did a tremendous job actually with the amount of things that still worked under it, because it was such a colossal change of architecture from the Windows 90X days. And fantastic, really. I mean, obviously, 20 years old, horrendously insecure by today's standards.
Well, you say that, but did you see the story that the Dune screenplay was actually written on a Windows XP machine and a DOS actually?
In the DOS,
using a movie master software, which I actually remember from back in the day, and basically it was written that way because it's on a disk. He's not got the XP on the internet. Nobody can get to the script.
I hope his backups work.
Yeah, and to be fair, none of the script leaked, so it must have worked.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess you guys can remember when XP came out as well. It was terribly exciting. It was it was really quite a revolutionary thing. I don't think we've really had that kind of revolution under the hood since, really. I mean, I know things have changed and improved, but it just that felt like a colossal move, a leap forward from the old code base to, I guess, many bits and pieces of Windows. I bet if you poke around, you'll find XP lurking beneath the
a lot, yeah,
under the hood.
Yeah, definitely. And it was the first, like you said, it was the first consumer version of Windows 32-bit version, built on NT. So in work, we were using Windows 2000, and XP to 2000 isn't huge amount of leap, but from going from Windows 98 or Windows ME to Windows XP is a big change.
Yeah, it's surprising how fast it moved from Windows ME, which came out in 2000, to XP, which came out a year later. That felt like an incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Although, was it Neptune? It was called originally.
Neptune was the cancelled version. Yeah. Actually, funny you mentioned that, because I've got an article on that. Yeah. So I
can you hear me running the gears there again?
Yeah. I did do a video of that last year. I think actually the video was 2019. I think that I did these videos. So I did do one on Neptune, but Neptune was cancelled, and the Windows Whistler became the project that we know as XP. But when you think, we got tablet PC from XP, we got Windows Media Center was in there, automatic updates. There was a lot of stuff introduced in there in XP that. Yeah, like you said, we still use now. I dug out this screenshot as well from one of the development builds of Whistler, and you can see it's very curved buttons and curved screens, and it shows what goes around comes around in the development world.
It's true. I can remember when I was writing an app, even I think 5, 6, 7 years ago, and initially we had curved buttons and curved windows, and then sales said no, it must all be squared off. So yeah. It's funny how it happens.
Yeah, and in fact,
so as I could say, I do wonder if Neptune had actually gone live, would we still actually have this show?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, if there'd been no media center, we certainly wouldn't have. So yeah, we really have XP to thank for that. And it was only a year later, 2002, when XP Media Center was launched. With Service Pack 2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was all based on the fact that we had the XP multimedia experience, which was such a big thing.
Yeah, I'm just thinking Service Pack 2. I mean, that was almost an entirely new operating system, because Microsoft had the whole waking up to the fact that there were issues with security. And so suddenly you had the security center, you had a massively beefed up firewall, and they began to sort of really work hard at closing the holes. Which they've been doing ever since, really.
And really, I think there was a lot of, maybe we can get some from Microsoft or an ex-Microsoft to talk about it, but I think there was some thoughts of branding it as something else, wasn't there? XP Service Pack 2, but they decided to go with that, even though effectively it's much more of a change than Windows 10 to Windows 11 from XP to XP Service Pack 2.
Yeah. Definitely.
They could have rebranded it completely then, but of course they were on with Longhorn then, that project, which really spanned that from Service Pack 2 all the way up to Vista launch. That was the Longhorn period, which I do remember the betas. I think I definitely had a Whistler beta. I remember. I don't know that was on MSDN then, so I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was in a preview. Oh, I tell you what, yeah, it would have been MSDN. I do remember getting the disc, the preview disc of Whistler beta. I remember that. So yeah, that shows how long ago we have been doing this.
Yeah, I think my first Windows beta was when NT4 or the NT4 shell over Windows 3.551 was my first experience with Windows NT betas. And it was it was. I still maintain that Windows NT4 was, or maybe Windows 2000 was, the pinnacle of Windows.
Yeah,
that was a high watermark.
It was. Yeah, I think so. Windows 2000 had that the rock solidness of NT, but with a little bit of more sophisticated UI, and without any bells and whistles, because it was a business version, not a consumer. I think once XP, then they had to pander to consumers, and that's where it all went wrong.
All these pesky games and things. Goodness me, device drivers. Oh dear. Yeah,
I mean, if you remember NT4 workstation didn't have Hibernate or Sleep.
No,
so yeah, it didn't have plug and play the same. The thing. I remember when I first started one of my jobs, the guy there had a laptop with NT4, and NT4 was horrendous on a laptop. It was totally unsuitable for a laptop because it had none of the things. You can't just close your lid. If you did that, it would just carry on chugging away. The screen stayed on and everything. It was not designed for that until when it got to 2000. It was different. But yeah. It's that fine line between enterprise and consumers that Microsoft have balanced all the way from XP all the way. Still trying to balance it now, aren't they?
They are indeed.
With prints and things that those kind of issues.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
although I think their current print issues, do they not go right back to XP days?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think
so. Problems go back a long way. I think.
Yeah, I think so. So XP. So you check out the video, which I've got of all the. I think the video includes 4 different development builds, and you can see how it progressed from Windows 2000 to Windows XP, and some of the UI experiments that they tried, which never actually came to fruition. But actually, when I look at that screenshot, it's not 100 miles away from where we are now. So curves are back.
True, I shall raise a glass to Windows XP on its 20th birthday.
Yeah.
And even though I think it only went out of support, was it 2019? Was the last version of XP that finally died a death?
Yeah, it was at the EPOS version or something like that. Yeah.
So it's only recently gone. Although they did keep patching it even after it was officially support ended because of the various very nasty vulns and things which needed fixing. But yeah, so it has only just gone out of support, which is quite weird, really.
Now, moving on to a different gadget I wanted to talk about that I got you last week on the show. I talked about the LED controller that I was getting, so I did get hold of that. So this is the Raspberry Pi based microcontroller. I think it's microcontroller is probably the correct term for it, isn't it? It runs MicroPython. I've got it connected up to an LED light strip, and I've been really impressed with how fun and easy is this to get working. The only thing I've got issues with is the little tiny screwdriver you need to tighten the wires up in the terminals, but I have to get one of those little screwdrivers. But I managed to get some Python code set up on there, so the lights are on. In fact, let me use the Android app of Hue and turn my lights off. There you go. So you can see it's going through all different cycles. So this has got 98 LEDs in there, RGB, and each one is individually addressable and with 255 brightness levels. So it's hard to see on this camera, but you can see I've actually managed to address different ones and do different effects on there as well, just creating a few little loops and things like that. But yeah, I was really impressed with it, how you can actually address every single one, and you've got virtually infinite number of color combinations with the RGB controls. So this is going to be my Christmas decoration. I think I'm going to use. It's actually quite bright as well. Very nice little controller, that micro Python. It's easy to use, and there you go. So I've got that set up. It's got the other thing that's quite handy on it. It's got a couple of buttons on it. So I've got a button to turn it on and off effectively, and I've got a button that will toggle through the different modes, so you can have it in sort of automatic mode. But you can use sensors on here as well. So it's got you could put a temperature sensor or something like that on it and have it useful for other things as well. But and it's all USB-C for programming it, and just use Thorny on the laptop, and it works really well actually. So very much enjoyed playing with that. So it just shows you can how easy and accessible this kind of thing is nowadays.
Yeah, really good. I love the individually addressable ones. I think they just make so much fun.
Yeah.
They make for really good interior lights in cars. If you've got somewhere you can actually put around the interior. A lot of modern cars with sunroofs, there's a nice little gallery around the sunroof which you can fit them in, you can wire them in, but then you can actually shift the light across to the back of so you can have slightly brighter light at the front or darker light, or you can have the driver in darkness but the passengers with a nice glow behind them if they want to read or whatever. It works really well. I was expecting to see a lot more of that.
Yeah, it's really simple. It's no Wi-Fi or anything like that on it, but I guess you can interface it with other stuff as well. So it's all doable. And so they're like you said, they're really bright as well, and so you could use it for a bit of just like any kind of lighting. But with it being USB-C, it's all pretty much self-contained as well. But it's so much fun being able to control the individual lights with all the different levels. So I've got. On an Alexa, when it circles around when it's listening, the blue and the green. I've emulated that. I've emulated the red bit where it loses internet. I've done the Cylon thing with it going backwards and forwards, or as Richard likes, it's the Knight Rider thing. I've had a lot of fun coming up with different routines for that, and it's so simple to program as well. And it took sort of 10 minutes to get the first basics going on there. So yeah, a lot of fun with that. So I've enjoyed doing that. So that's my Christmas decorations project for this year sorted. and inexpensive too.
One of my friend's sons has put a panel on outside his bedroom door which goes either with a tick or a cross. And it animates between the two.
It's got a lot of uses for it. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I've quite enjoyed playing around with that, and maybe the next thing is I'm going to get it hooked up with my temperature sensor, and you could have a big thermometer. I could see it from, if it was on the greenhouse, I could see it from outside to see whether it was red or green or red or blue or something. Yeah, so that's been my fun. So I've enjoyed playing with that, and the MicroPython is pretty cool as well. So nice, fun project. I'm guessing that is something that if you wanted to get your kids into a bit of programming, that is definitely a good way, because it's simple, easy to use, and you get immediate visual results, and it is quite addictive as well. So yeah, maybe one way of introducing kids into a bit of programming, which is always good. Okay, so I didn't realize. Look at the time on that. So I think that's just about everything we've got time for. But Gary, you did give me an interview, which so we've got for tonight as well. Yeah,
with EV side, Simon. I really enjoyed doing this one. It's a cracking little interview. Lots of discussion around the whole EV world, and Simon also rides some absolutely crazy personal electric transport, especially some off-roading stuff. You watch some of his videos. He does a lot of, legally he does a lot of off-roading on unicycles, which is crazy. It's a crazy thing to do, but he's wearing all the safety equipment, so he knows what he's doing. But yeah, very interesting chat. And we chewed a lot of cud, as they say. Stuff, but it was a good. Really enjoyed doing this one.
Excellent. Well, we'll go over to that minute. So, Gary, where can we find you?
You can find me at Twitter at Gary with 2 R's WMA, and everything else I talk about is on there. And also, as I mentioned last time I was on the EV Side podcast, which has had a bit of traction. My own place talk, rather long in podcast, but it's well worth listening to. And he's been putting out a really few very interesting podcasts recently, as Greg, including one all about plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and whether they're any good or not. So that's quite an interesting one to listen to. Yeah.
Excellent. Richard, where can we find you?
On Twitter at Richard_Speed.
Excellent. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Oh, I do have one other further announcement, is we are getting someone from Microsoft, from the Windows Insider team, on the show in the next few weeks. So if you've got questions for the Windows Insider team, probably don't ask them to explain which version of 21H2 is available, but any other questions, anything Windows 11 related, whatever, fire them over to me at thislifestyle.com or on Twitter, or however you want to get in touch, and we'll include those. I'll play them all together and we'll include them on the show for that interview.
I've just realised I just said the EV Side podcast. I need to take an EV podcast, but there we go.
Okay. Right. Well, okay. Well, let's go straight to that, and we'll see you next week.
Nice. Simon.
EV side.
Hello.
Steve.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No, absolute pleasure.
It's so most of my audience probably don't know who you are, because at the moment most of our audience are still EV interested but not actually EV owners.
Yep.
Which is good to know on the Digital Lifestyle Show. So I've been watching your channel for ages.
Thank you.
And you do some interesting stuff, because you're not all about cars like most of the people I've been talking to today are.
No.
Sort of personal electric transport, that's what they call it here, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so like I started with I suppose this whole electric journey of any sort of transport probably 3 years ago or so, when I bought my first car, my BMW i3, and that was kind of like the instigator of anything electric is possible. Now, people that know me know that, like, you know, this was a bit of a leap of faith for me back then, because I still to this day live in a flat. I still to this day do not have home charging, and yet I run an electric car.
Which proves it's possible. And I was another example of that.
100%.
I've only just moved into a house which has got charging, and that's so novel for me.
I know, it must be a game changer now, isn't it?
But you exist on public charging, I existed on public charging.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible, and in fact back then it was difficult but not impossible, and literally it's just become easier and easier, and that kind of I don't know, maybe triggered something in my head that, like, there was other forms of transport out there. And I'd looked around, and a chap that I'll give a shout out to, which is a Fees K from E-Rides. I've known him for about 4 years, and he ridden around on this thing called an electric unicycle. And I looked at it, and it looked absolutely terrifying, scary. I'd never step foot on a skateboard or anything like that. The closest I come was a normal bicycle. And bless him, he's tried for 4 or 5 hours to teach me, and it was a no. Like, it scared me to death. I didn't want to do it, but I wanted to do something. So I bought a cheap Chinese electric skateboard, and thought, I'll give that a go, and if I don't kill myself on that first, then maybe that's the thing. And 2 weeks in, I came off the board at 25 miles an hour. Luckily, I was padded up at the time. Still terrified me a lot, but then I got back on it, and then absolutely started to love it and enjoy it. And that passion over the last sort of couple of years has just built and built. And I've found that there's not just one type of board. There's like off-road stuff and things like that, and that kind of grew into off-road boarding, which I kind of tend to do more now, and then that's now finally kind of come full circle to a unicycle, which I never thought I would get back on again, because the thought of going from 4 wheels that is still dangerous and still quick. I mean, these boards can go upwards of 25, 26 miles an hour, even off-road. It's with nothing holding you on. To go into a unicycle which has got 1 wheel, can go 60 miles an hour, and can do off-road, I was terrified. So I bought a almost like a training sort of wheel a couple of months ago, literally, and I thought, I'll try that. If that works and I don't fall off enough and I don't hurt myself enough, I'll stick with it. And somebody told me, because the first sort of week was really hard going. It was fall off, get on, fall off, get on, fall off, get on, every single day for about half an hour to an hour every day. And somebody said, it will just click. And when you're falling off, that's the last thing you want somebody to tell you, is it will just click. And weirdly, in the second week, it just did. I pushed away from a wall, and I fell off a couple of times, and then I eventually pushed off from the wall and stayed on. And I was like, I can do this. And it came down to like overthinking the situation, is that this thing won't balance me, won't keep me upright and things like that. And now moving forward, I mean, that was about a month ago. And then the last couple of weeks I've since upgraded to this new unicycle, which is the 60 mile an hour, 60 mile range, which is insane that it's got the same range as what an old Nissan Leaf would have. And I've done so much because of that, and so much exploring. You know, a week ago I was up a Welsh mountain on this thing. I've hit 31 miles an hour on this thing already, and the amount of freedom this thing gives you is just insane. So my kind of bring back to your original question, the channel was born out of electric cars, and it still very much does feature electric cars and things like we're at now, fully charged, but it encompasses all kinds of transport, because there is just so much out there, from scooters, bikes, skateboards. I think about a year or so ago it was electric boat, car reviews and things like that, and I kind of try to cover everything that I'm passionate about. So at the moment it's electric unicycles, but again there's I'll do interviews with people, I'll review a car if it excites me. Now somebody said to me recently, why haven't you're going more towards electric unicycles and things like that, and I said I still like doing the car stuff, but it needs to excite me now, because it's great that all these electric cars are coming out, but the last one that really excited me was the Honda E, and I loved it because it was quirky. Now anyone that's seen a BMW i3, it's a love it or hate it car. You're either going to fall in love with it or you're going to absolutely hate it. It's one of those. It's a Marmite car. Honda E to me is the same type of thing, and it's quirky, and I like that, and something about it needs to kind of grab me. I mean, it's great that Vauxhall and Ford and people like that are bringing out electric cars, but none of them excite me, and that's what I want to do now. The channel stuff, I want to make kind of things that excite me as well as hopefully the audience, and it's not just, I know the audience like me falling off stuff, so there's still going to be plenty of that, but at the same time it's good to get some of the car stuff as well.
So what cars do excite you at the moment?
The cars excite me at the moment. From a dream world sort of point of view, it's a lot of the classic stuff that are being renovated for electric. If I had the money, some of them, like the Porsches and things like that, are just incredible. And some of the attention to detail that these people are bringing are just, it's not just let's just put an electric in it and that. They're renovating so the car looks even better than it was when it was originally made. So they are, and I think from a modern point of view, the Kia 6 looks incredible. I've briefly sat in it at a press event until the vultures got around it and kind of got in the way. But that to me looks like Kia, who are already pretty good in leading in terms of battery technology, have gone right. We've set it up. We know we can get 300-mile range out of this sort of technology. Let's make a really cool looking car, and that to me is what like EV6 is, and that excites me. The Ioniq 5 excites me outside, and people are probably going to hate this, but like I don't like the interior at all, and it's a personal preference. I think the inside of that looks dated, and if you go to the Kia 6 outside looks fantastic, inside looks modern and fantastic and things like that. So that really is exciting, and to be honest, I really want Tesla to come up with that 20-25 grand car, because that will be game changing. Their cars are already brilliant. Everyone knows Tesla cars are great. Everyone knows the infrastructure is great. Although let's hope that infrastructure goes towards other manufacturers soon. But if they brought out a £25,000 car in this country, it would just go through the roof. And
you only got to look at what's happened with the MG.
Yeah,
I mean, and that's in terms of what people want or say they want from an EV. Because obviously the reality is maybe slightly different to what people say. But people say they want 200-300 mile range, they want easy charging and all that. If Tesla were to bring out a car in that same price range, I mean,
it's a no-brainer.
MG already selling. They can't make enough of the damn thing. So
Tesla would literally kill the rest of the car competition with that. And for me, it's like now coming from a BMW i3, my lowest range in winter is about 90 to 100 miles. I always said, like, guaranteed 200 miles. I don't need any more than that. I don't need 400, 500, 600 miles. I know that's what manufacturers are desperately trying to get to. But you actually don't. If you live in the UK,
you definitely don't.
200 miles, you can get to Manchester.
Yeah. Like I drive an I-Pace, and my range now is 200 miles plus all the time, winter and summer, and that is enough. It really is enough.
Yeah.
I know. I was talking to Mike Jelfs earlier, and he's very much of the opinion that 150 is actually enough.
Yeah, I probably, and as long as it's a guaranteed 150 as well. Yeah,
and I think that's probably is true, because you can get coast to coast almost on that. If you,
absolutely.
Yeah, and now we are at last seeing the infrastructure start to improve, and some of the charging points. I mean, the other thing I was talking to Mike about was the lack of destination charging in this country. Which there are other places in the world I've been to, and destination charging is the way you go, and you get to a place and there's 5 or 6 chargers at every hotel and everything.
It is strange, isn't it? Like where even a year ago, we were talking about the fast infrastructure, like the motorway services and things like that. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
It was poor, and there's not enough fast chargers. And actually, that's vastly improved now. And now we're talking the other end. It's like, but when I get to a destination, I want to be able to plug in, go and do shopping, whatever. The most random one I went to literally 2 weeks ago when I was at this Welsh mountain, I thought I'm going to have to find somewhere to charge, like on the way, a fast charger. I turned up and there was 4 7-kilowatt pod points in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is ideal, because I plugged in, went riding, come back, and I was full.
And that's what people, when you're going somewhere on a long distance, you do tend to stay there.
Yeah.
So if you can get, I mean, most places I visit when I've been to shop is 4 or 5 hours. 4 or 5 hours, you can get a decent charge in on a slow charger.
Absolutely.
And I just think that it's a lot easier to provide that sort of infrastructure than it is the more expensive infrastructure.
Yeah, because it doesn't require, like, I mean, anyone that sees, things like Ionity chargers and stuff like that, there's always a massive infrastructure that sits behind them. But with 7-kilowatt chargers, it's straight into the main grid, and away you go.
Yeah, and that would also alleviate, I think, a lot of the take up on the motorway services, because people need them. You ride and you charge when you get there.
It's just ideal. I mean, I stopped at. I didn't have to charge this morning, but like to go home tomorrow, it's like I stopped at Instavolt at the McDonald's, and I was like, well, this is brilliant, because come in, plugged in, contactless payment, fast. I can go and have breakfast, write notes for an interview I was scared about, and then literally get back in the car, and my car is full, ready for tomorrow. I mean, even for having that in a convenient place where you're doing something while you're doing it. And this is what petrol people don't seem to get. It's like, when you go to fill up your petrol,
you can't do it.
You can't do anything else. You're sitting there pumping this horrible stuff in. When you've got an EV, you're having breakfast, you're going to the cinema, you're doing all these things.
That's right, and most of the time, unlike yourself, you're charging at home.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. Well, that's why I got an electric unicycle. I don't need to charge that anymore.
Well, I stopped on the way. I mean, I did stop the other end of the sewer. I stopped at Cobham and was going to use the electricity. Well, I must stop saying that.
I know.
GridServe, electric highway. My GridServe friends would be very upset if I say that. But they used the GridServe, but they were all in use. I went to the Ionities and they were all in use, which is, I mean, that's just unbelievable to see that.
Yeah.
So I had to wait a little bit, but not very long, and then get on charging there. Unfortunately, I have a charge point card, so I could reduce that cost a little bit. But even so, that's
it's kind of an extreme situation, though, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, if you're at Farnborough like this fully charged show, the amount of EV cars around here is ridiculous.
Well, it's a bit like rugby services were just after EV in the park. We're queuing
full.
Full to get those. But it is a rare occurrence.
Yes, yeah.
But it was interesting. The reason I ended up at Cobham was because I was down south and none of the chargers were working, because they're all on Polar or charge your car or whatever, and just nothing was working over the weekend, which is unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd to think that a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, and I'd be the first bit on my channel, I was very vocal about a certain motorway charging infrastructure company that were awful, frankly awful. And for people like me that couldn't charge at home, it's reliability.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, somebody asked me, it's like, why do you pay that amount of money to charge a car? And I said, that's because I've got no other way of charging it. So if I go to an Ionity or I go to Instavolt, things like that, I pay what I pay because but as long as it's reliable and when I'm there, it works. For me, that's paramount, and that just wasn't there. And now, fast forward a year, we're now looking at another company that unfortunately is in the same situation.
Yeah, and why? It's a really weird thing that's happened, because they were so good. And you wonder what's actually happened to them.
I mean, for me, there's the skeptic part of me that says they're there to disrupt and bring fossil fuels back and all that bad stuff. There's another part of me to say that there's something wrong within their services team and that kind of area of the business that is so broken that has an effect on the infrastructure and what they're doing. Because we found that with Ecotricity at the time, that it wasn't my frustration with them, it wasn't the passion to be able to do something and they wanted to make it better. It was the naivety to think that they could do it without money and they could do it without actually doing stuff and then not get the criticism. And unfortunately, the BP Pulse, I'm going to say it out now, I've lost complete faith in them to a point now I avoid them like I did Ecotricity.
Which is such a weird thing.
And
it used to be my go-to.
So sorry, state of affairs. I walked down to the BP Pulse sort of thing like that, and I didn't go in because I wasn't sure what I was going to say.
Well, they've had a few people tell them a few things today. Yeah. But I think it's interesting. I've got that sceptic as before, but BP have got an agenda to move away from oil. I mean, they're investing left, right, and centre in green energy, and they seem to be doing it deliberately, not to disrupt, but to actually they see that's the future.
And they've got billions. It's not like, the way I look at this is like, if you're a company like BP, putting infrastructure in and making it work is a tiny investment compared to the sheer billions they are currently making. And even if they do it as a PR exercise, they would still make money. I don't understand it. It's worrying that it's gone downhill in a matter of months. It's not even like it's been a year. Literally 6 months ago, it wasn't brilliant, but it was okay and it worked and things like that. And then literally it's fallen off.
And you do wonder, to some extent, is it the network which existed previously, as opposed to the network they're now building, which is they're building it at their forecourts, and
maybe that's a dying kind of trade, and then actually, like you said, it's going to move into the forecourts,
and those ones they do seem to. Although I've still found a few broken ones of those, and they were all affected by their back end issues as well, that happens to everybody.
Seems to be slightly more reliable, don't they?
Yeah, it's slightly more reliable. I've often thought it's part of this land grab which is going on at the moment, where everybody's trying to install chargers absolutely everywhere, and sometimes installing them way before they're actually ready to go live because they haven't even got the power connection.
Yeah, you kind of see the boxes there, don't you? But covered up, and there's nothing else.
And that's because they want the land before anyone else gets it. Because land's a big problem. Nobody's got anywhere to put these things because the way the planning permission works, and we're having conversations about that earlier. It's very tricky for them to get planning permission for this stuff. I do want, and also there's a lot of government grants going around for installs last year. So I think people. So I do wonder if a lot, and this I've seen with some other charter networks as well, that maybe it's a case of they put people who normally be doing the maintenance of these things actually out on the installs. Because they'll see, and this is, I work in the IT industry because people think my YouTube channel is my main job, but it really is. I don't make fortunes from it, but like in the IT industry, we do exactly that. It's like if you've got an issue that people are experiencing in the back end, the best way to teach them about it and make that customer service element better is put them on the front line and say, right, if you was an end user and you was experiencing that's what you'd experience. So take that learning when somebody phones you up and it's 12 o'clock at night, it's raining and they want the charger to work. Use that, and that's the big, I think that's the big gap, because if you do that, you then experience what that person is experiencing and it's not good, and you instantly know that something has to change. And I think that, for me, is the biggest thing I've seen from the likes of GridServe. The fact is that Toddington and people that work in there, and you only got to see it in the Braintree team, they're the first ones out in the forecourt. Are you all right? Everything going okay? Can you charge okay? And everything's fine, but it's that care and consideration for the person using it. Yeah, absolutely. And it comes because I've spoken to Sam a lot from, and first and foremost, they're EV drivers.
100%.
Yeah, they get it. They absolutely get the experience. They want to make that better, and it's a passion for them, as well as being something they're going to make money off. It's a passion.
Yeah.
And a really good business model as well, which is totally sustainable. So it's.
Yeah, I can't wait for the grid surf in Stevenage. Literally 5 miles from where I live.
It's going to be brilliant. I've got one coming up down the road. So it's great. I mean, but the other thing is they're filling in some of those gaps. I mean, the fact they've got one coming in Norwich fairly shortly, that's going to make some coast journeys that's so much better.
It's okay in the fact that you've got some Instavolt scattered there, but having something like that in the middle, just easy.
And it's great to see some competition for Instavolt as well, on what's going to be reliable. And I mean, I talked to Instavolt earlier, and they're brilliant, and they do, and their focus is still that mentality they have. I mean, I don't know if you've ever met any of the Instavolt engineers.
I've met a couple, but
they're always so keen to talk to you. It's
kind of ingrained in the way they think.
And it's nice to see that level coming from GridServe as well. So you're going to have two competing teams who've both got that passion. That can only be good.
It absolutely. I mean, for me, it's reliability.
Yeah.
I want to know, if I turn up on a long journey with a 5-year-old like in the back, that I have to charge, and we're going to stop, but I need to be able to charge, and to not have that, or not to have multiple charges at a point. And I don't even mind waiting, because you generally aren't waiting long. I mean, we done a 220-mile journey down to Torquay for a holiday, and that was my worst fear, in the fact that we had the whole family in there. It's the first time we'd done that sort of distance. And it was easy because we stopped at Instavolts both times. Yeah. And I turned up, there was multiples, it was contact, it was charged. I had a coffee while I was waiting.
And it works.
And it works. And I was like, just breath of fresh air.
And one of my big things, and we're going to see this more and more, I think, is you've got the experience I've got. So you've got the i3 and the iBase both have some compatibility issues with superchargers. And that's not actually probably either of the car's fault, because they're following what is a flawed standard. The CCS standard just isn't really a standard. It's just, and I think that we actually need a British. Now we're going to have British standards back. I think we need a British standard for charging.
Absolutely,
this does cable length and compatibility.
That all please a lot of people.
Yeah, and then the charger manufacturers wouldn't have any excuse, and the car manufacturers wouldn't have any excuse. They've got to meet these standards. So I think that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, I turned up a Shell charger just before I went to Cobham. And I turned up, drove up, looked at it, and drove off again, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to charge it, because it's an FSX, one of the older FSX.
It wouldn't.
And the iBases just don't connect to them. And yet they should do. I mean, there's no reason why you should be able to pull that.
You look at that connector, and you look at the connector on your car, and it should.
Yeah, it should go.
It should work. Yeah.
And it's just that absolutely flawed sound. And the other thing is Multi-Fuel Group. Now they're putting some great charges in, really short cables, because they're eVolt. And eVolt got this thing that they think the car, they're fine. They follow the standard.
They're really not. And my one experience with eVolt was awful.
Yeah.
And it was in Norfolk, and wanted to charge.
Wasn't the Swan one, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was one random one in like Great Yarmouth or something like that. And I plugged in, swiped my card, and then couldn't get the connector out.
Yeah.
So it stopped, charged me the holding charge of £65, which was an insane price. Done it again, managed to get it out, and then the cable was too short, like that, and then charged me another £60. So I'm £130 down in my account already, and I know people say, "Oh, you use a credit card, blah blah blah," but there's no reason for that holding charge to be that high. Instavolt, £5, perfect.
Yeah.
And the whole experience was bad, and it's like, again, it comes back to that same point that we said earlier. It's like, get that person out to one of those, and then see somebody struggling and trying to get the cable around and where it is, and where there's some sites that you kind of look at and you're thinking, why did you put a charger there?
Yeah.
Like there's one set of chargers for Shell, and I remember doing those, and what they've done is that the bays are fine, but then down the side of the bays are these big metal posts where you would normally open your door.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is pointless.
And I've had this matter. There's quite a few charges where they put the posts, particularly backdoor passengers can't on the iPads when you trying to get those in, you can't get people out. It's crazy.
It's absolute madness.
Yeah, it's really stupid. I mean, I know they want to protect the chargers, but
it's a bit. I get from the back, when you pull up to it, but to have them down the side where you're physically trying to get out of your car. I've climbed through the car before to actually get out to then plug the car in. It's
a ridiculous situation. Anyway, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been brilliant. We will have to have you back on again.
I'm more than happy to do that.
We'll do all our longer segments and get that in.
Likewise, I'd like to have you on the show on the YouTube channel.